Okay, welcome everybody. So this is our talk with Thomas and I am Clément Stahl. I am postdoc in Laboratoire Astroparticule et Cosmology in Paris, Université de Paris, and Thomas is PhD student there, and we are studying non-Gaussianities. We are together speaking on the behalf of three of other collaborators. So JJJ, so Julian Adamek, Juan Calles, and Jorgen Oreña. I guess they are all here listening to us also. And yeah, the main message we want to convey is that all the relativistic correction that we are most of all looking with a keen eyes and studying, for some of us even heavily, building our career on that, those relativistic effects, they can contaminate, without pun, a primordial non-Gaussian signal and a possible detection of it. And so all those relativistic effects that we are modeling for different reasons, one of the applications is to study primordial non-Gaussianities. Good. So we'll split our talk into two parts. I will try to give a bird's eye view, more motivation, introduction, why we are doing that. And Thomas will talk about those dirty details of the code he's been writing called D3P. And it's a code which allows to have non-Gaussian initial condition for Jevolution, a code that I guess most of you are familiar with. And okay, so let's get started. So very quickly, because I guess most of us work on that. Topic today is Larkel structure. So this is cartoon picture of the cosmic history. Time go from left to right. And in order to study large-scale structure, you want to study the tools you are using are fluid mechanics in an expanding universe. Good. So my definition of large-scale structure is this split between the background quantity. So we can make background statements. The universe is expanding. It has a mean. What is the components on large scale of the universe? And the little perturbation, which grows from tiny fluctuation to all the structure we see today. Galaxy, cluster of galaxy, and so on. So the whole question we try to answer is how to go from the left picture, which is initial condition for a body simulation, to the right, which is the final condition of the body simulation. And okay, here it is with n-body simulation, so numerical codes, but you also have analytical techniques, and obviously people are trying to observe that also in the sky and make everything coherent. And so far, most of the studies most of the observation also were done on scale much smaller than the Hubble scale. And therefore, you see me coming, the relativistic effect did not matter, because the relativistic effect matter when you are at the Hubble radius, when you start to see GR and when you start to see that you have a curved space-time set. Also, typically, the velocity of the structure formed on the right picture, say, is maximum 1% of the speed of light, and the gravitational potential is also small. So this is why people didn't start from the first place at calculating with relativistic correction, and this is also is called correction, because Newtonian physics is working quite well. And at the level of at early enough time, the universe is in the so-called linear regime, and you can write down linear fluid mechanics in an expanding universe. And that's worked insanely well. You can do very clear prediction, and you can also measure it very clearly. And so I'm thinking about the CMB physics, and you know that many Nobel Prizes were awarded for its detection and the way you can constrain fundamental physics and so on. So our goal, all the people from LSS, is to do the same, to write down clear equations, solve them, and make clear prediction, and then you try to observe that. This will be done in the next 10 years. And you constrain fundamental physics, for instance, inflation and all these things, and you get Nobel Prizes. So that's what we are really aiming for. Good. So also very quickly, because I guess most of you work on that, I just want to emphasize the fact that if you want to write down Friedman equation at the background level, you don't need to use the full Einstein equation in the nonlinear case and so on. You just state the fact that the length can depend on time, the universe is expanding, and you do a bit of algebra, you can write down Friedman equation. Same for linear scalar perturbation. You don't need to write down Einstein equation with the IDM formalism and so on. You can really easily derive an equation for your scalar perturbation without, Einstein equation. And finally, in the nonlinear regime, you are on small scale and you expect to have local processes. So naively, you would say, okay, I form locally structure, Newtonian physics is enough. I don't need to know that I'm living in a curved space-time and so on, that Einstein exists. So naively, you should not, at the first glance, do GR, and that's what people did. But now that we are having better observation and more theory, people are starting to look at that, as most of you know. So first, some matter content of the universe is relativistic, as some talks from the previous session were also emphasizing. You can have cosmic string, dynamical dark energy. And also, as you know, gravity, the best theory that we have is GR, and GR has 6 degrees of freedom. So if you want to study LSS, okay, maybe only the one scalar degree of freedom is enough. But if you want to constrain all this other degree of freedom, you may be willing to work in a framework where you can actually turn them on and then constrain them. And therefore, the claim is, why not using the best theory that we have, even though we know that some degree of freedom are not too big, but we can constrain them. And if you want to look at modified gravity and so on, those degree of freedom, you can constrain them only in this framework. Okay, also this idea of back reaction, which have been talked from this workshop, I guess also. Some quantities that you have in back reaction are total derivative in Newtonian physics, so back reaction need to be tackled is the best way in a GR framework. And finally, what you observe in cosmology, in astrophysics, is things coming to the telescope, lights, or okay, nowadays also gravitational waves. But at the end of the day, all those two things, they come from a relativistic light cone, perturbed also. So in order to understand properly what we observe, we also need to have a relativistic framework. Very good. So all this motivates to look at relativistic structure formation, and the claim that we are making, and which is motivating our project or studies, is the fact that relativistic correction and an non-Gaussian signal, primordial one, impact in the same way the bispectrum in the squeeze limit. So let me explain you. I will go through obviously all in very careful details what I mean by bispectrum, squeeze limit, and a non-Gaussian signal. But first, let me try to tell you what is going on. So this slide explains that in the case for primordial non-Gaussianities, so coming from multi-field inflation, so the galaxies, they form in the peaks. When you have more dark matter distribution, you form galaxy. But if you have a primordial non-Gaussian signal and you have similar effect from relativistic correction, you can couple the galaxies with the potential. So they are coupled together. And this leads to an enhancement of the power spectrum, the so-called scale-dependent bias. So this is one prediction, clear prediction for primordial non-Gaussianities. And at the level of bispectrum, you also have an enhancement on large scale. And for relativistic effect, it's the same. So in both cases, you enhance on large scale for the bispectrum, and in this case also for the power spectrum, your 2-point or 3-point correlation function, or your statistics. Very well. So what do I mean by bispectrum? So in standard studies, you study the 2-point correlation function. So that's defined as the power spectrum. And the bispectrum is just an image of the 3-point correlation function. So I wrote you definition here, equation 1, 2. And okay, so the Dirac delta, delta D, ensure statistical isotropy. And you see that the power spectrum is function of one scale, K1, and the bispectrum is function of 3 scale. Whereas at the first place, naively, you would say, okay, power spectrum, 2-point correlation function is function of 3 scales, 2 vector, 2, 3 vector, and bispectrum 6. And this is the key point, actually, because the power spectrum, it depends only on one scale. So either you are on small scale, so large separation in K, and you ask the question, okay, I have a galaxy here. What is the probability to have a galaxy at this distance? Therefore, either you're on large scale or on small scale. So you see that on small scale, okay, you are non-linear, but Newtonian, and on large scale, you are relativistic, but linear. The case of bispectrum, you can couple scale. You can be at the same time in the large scale and in the small scale. And this will be the mechanism which will make the relativistic correction important when you couple the scale, and also the primordial non-Gaussianities. Okay, So the primordial non-Gaussianities are quantized with this parameter FNL, which is roughly the bispectrum divided by the power spectrum square. And I put you some constraints, which you see are not really strict type, compatible with 0. And this idea is that LSS could improve this because this is CMB constraint, W map and Planck, and CMB has surface information. So if you define the number of modes, the number of information, the surface multiplied by the maximal length probed by your survey, you find that since large-scale structure is 3D information and not 2D as CMB, you have much more info inside the LSS. Obviously, the information is harder to extract, both because of the measurement, which are more difficult, and because it's harder to model the non-linear information that you have there, whereas CMB physics is linear. But in principle, you have much more info. You just have to extract it. And that's where we're standing. We try to help on the modeling side to extract, in particular, the information about the primordial non-Gaussianities. We are particularly interested, and we continue also. One more thing I want to tell you, I speak about the squeeze limit. So the squeeze limit, so the bispectrum is defined as a function of 3 scale, as I told you in the slide of the previous slide, and K1, K2, K3. And one common way to describe them is the following. So first you fix K1, and then you plot K2 over K3 as a function of K3 over K1. Sorry, you plot K2 over K1 as a function of K3 over K1. And K2 over K1 go between 0 and 1, whereas K3 over K1 go between 0.5 and 1. And you see that at this dot here, on the top right, you have an equilateral configuration because all are equal to 1. And if you span this inverted triangle here, you will have all the possible configuration of K1, K2, K3, up to some reordering and so on. You can span all the configuration inside this triangle. And what I mean by squeezed is just the top left region, where you have 2 Ks which are large and 1 which is small. Therefore, 2 large scales and 1 small scale. And this squeeze limit is meant to be protected in some sense from nonlinear growth, biasing, and astrophysics. So it's an interesting region. And a second reason why it's interesting is also because you can probe fundamental physics, and by this I mean inflation with that, with non-Gaussianities actually. So, okay, so the energy scale of inflation is unknown and can span 10 orders of magnitude. And the most canonical way, I would say, to try to constrain inflation is through the detection of B modes and how the primordial gravitational waves impact CMB photon. So the CMB community is gathering around, say, this CMB S4 science book. And the idea is to try to build a new detector in order to detect B modes and constrain with the amplitude of those B modes the gravitational waves amplitude. One problem is that, as I told you, you can span 10 orders of magnitude. And the amplitude of the B modes, the amplitude of the primordial gravitational waves, scale with the energy scale of inflation. So you diminish the energy scale of inflation, you diminish the primordial gravitational waves. And if they are too small, there is no hope, zero to detect them in the next future. So what to do? That is where primordial non-Gaussianities come into the play. So their amplitude do not scale with the energy scale of inflation. So in principle, even if you are a really low scale inflation, you can still have a good amount of primordial non-Gaussianities. So it complements gravitational wave sources. And already almost 20 years ago, Maldacena was looking at those things, and he noticed that if you have only 1 degree of freedom during inflation, you can exactly predict the value of your FNL at the end of inflation. So it's 10 to minus 2. Therefore, if you then correctly take into account the evolution from inflation to our telescope, so-called projection effect, a detection of FNL primordial larger than 10 to minus 2 ruled out all single inflation. So really exciting. So people work out different way out. So other possibilities than single field inflation, so the way out of this theorem. So I list some of them here. I'm happy about this one because I work a bit during my PhD thesis, but those are all class of model. And it's mainly always the same principle, put new degree of freedom. but each degree of freedom I list here have a different signature. And you can propagate then from inflation to large-scale structure and try to look in large-scale structure. And that's what we try to do. We try to propagate a primordial signal all the way to a telescope. And while doing that, we noticed that relativistic correction, for the same reason I explained you before, that they couple scale, as primordial non-Gaussianities does, the local ones, they couple the scales, the large and the small. We noticed that they are strongly degenerated, so they need to be disentangled. Good, in one slide, if you have primordial non-Gaussianities, if you don't have primordial non-Gaussianities, you have single field inflation, you have a Gaussian, almost Gaussian distribution for the fluctuation, matter fluctuation. Whereas if you have strong non-Gaussianities, you have this sort of thing. And this sort of thing, you have to propagate them. And if you propagate them using Newtonian physics, you would do a mistake because the relativistic correction would do exactly the same type of non-Gaussian mapping, going from, say, a Gaussian to this, could be one effect of the relativistic correction. Good. So to conclude, okay, most of LSS do not need relativity, because most of the people could do without and observe put very tight constraint on anything. But for the bispectrum, since it couples scale, if you want to do a proper calculation, you need to use GR. And this bispectrum is really interesting for several reasons. First, it's protected from various effects which can be hard to model, so physical effect, biasing, nonlinear physics. You can also probe early universe physics with this, do fundamental statement about the nature of space-time and so on. And finally, you can also, in principle, measure it in the next generation of experiments. So for all these reasons, it's really interesting to look at this quantity and to try to model it better. And Thomas will now show us how to do it within G-evolution, so which is this relativistic code. And Thomas, I'll let you speak.
Okay, so in this second part, thank you, Clément, for the first part. We will talk about the implementation of the second order initial condition generator that we have written, and it's called D3P. So let us first start with a small picture of the history of the universe. Here, within the center of the universe, our laboratory, the IPC. So first we have, of course, the inflation. And inflation, the most simple inflation model that we know and that is strongly motivated by observation is a single field inflation model that generates right after the reheating, during which the remaining energy in the inflaton will decay into all the particles that are filling the universe today. And they are generated in phase, which means that we have adiabatic initial conditions. So all the perturbation of each species should be equal deep in the radiation domination era. And those perturbations are also proportional to the curvature perturbation that we are going to use during this presentation, and that we usually use to speak about the adiabatic mode R. And as Clément said, the inflation, or at least the most simple model of inflation, generates mostly Gaussian adiabatic, Gaussian adiabatic initial conditions. And one of the main goals in the studying large-scale structure and CMB is to measure deviation from Gaussianities, which would give us a lot of information of inflation, and in particular rule out single-field inflation. But to do so, we have to understand the evolution, all the evolution of those initial conditions. And usually what we do is to use the first order Boltzmann code that propagates those initial conditions through the cosmological history. And when we do this only at first order, a Gaussian will always remain a Gaussian. And when we enter the nonlinear regime where the structures start to form, we will have to use n-body simulation to study the large-scale structures. And those n-body simulation needs initial conditions that are usually computed using this first-order propagation of purely Gaussian initial conditions. And the main goal of our project is to take also into account the second-order perturbation evolution that will also generate non-Gaussianities that could be, if we don't take them into account, seen as primordial non-Gaussianities. So let us first start with the standard way to generate Gaussian adiabatic initial condition. So as we know, inflation predicts that deep in the radiation domination era, the primordial power spectrum should be this form with NS close to 1. And it is measured as being very close to 1, but not 1. So you just generate a grid. You take the coordinates, Kx and Ky. You can compute the modulus of your modes and then the power spectrum everywhere in your grid. Then having all your power spectra value, for each pixel, you will draw a Gaussian with standard deviation, which is linked with this power spectrum that we just computed. And for each pixel, you will randomly pick two numbers, K and Bk, that are the real part and the imaginary part of the curvature perturbation. And because, of course, the curvature perturbation should be real in real space, then we have to impose those reality conditions in order to have the primordial conditions deep in the radiation domination era. Then we need to evolve those perturbations through cosmological history. And to do so, we have a very important property of first order equation that are invariant under translation. And this means that in Fourier space, the modes are decoupled. They evolve independently at first order so that any field I of first order can be decomposed into a product of R, which is a stochastic primordial quantity here, a curvature perturbation, and a transfer function that can be computed deterministically. So if we look, for example, at the 0, Einstein equation, you can replace all first order fields here by this product. And so all the stochastic part can be simplified in order to have at the end a deterministic equation on the first order transfer function of each field. And as I said before, at first order, if you start from a Gaussian, you will always have a Gaussian at any other redshift, and the standard deviation at any other redshift can be computed with the power spectrum and the standard deviation are linked, are proportional. So the power spectrum at a given time can be computed thanks to the transfer function squared multiplied by the primordial power spectrum that we know from inflation. Now let's turn to the second order evolution, which look like a bit more complicated, but actually on the left-hand side, you may note that this is exactly the same equation as the first order equation that is here. You will just have replaced all first order fields by second order fields. And on the right-hand side, now we don't have 0. We have what we call the quadratic source term, which means terms that are proportional to a product of two first order fields. And this, when you Fourier transform any product of two functions, you will have in Fourier space a convolution integral. So an integral over K1 or two different modes. So if we define those second order transfer function this way, so that the second order field can be also written as a convolution integral with the second order transfer function, then we can also simplify all the stochastic parts in this equation when you go in Fourier space, so that at the end, you will have a deterministic equation involving the second order transfer functions and the squared first order transfer functions. And to find those second order transfer function, we have to use second order Boltzmann codes. And in our project, we have used SONG, which is the second order part of class, or COM, which is the first order Boltzmann code. And we have here, of course, the Gaussian field that we know how to compute now from the primordial power spectrum. So let us now integrate K2. We can do this thanks to the Dirac delta. So that we have here only one integral over K1. And this kind of integral, so any field at second order can be written as this kind of integral. And it is very costly to compute because for each K3, which means for each pixel, we have to perform a sum over the whole grid. You have to know the value everywhere to multiply and then sum all pixels, which means that for one pixel, you have n to the 3 in 3 dimensions, of course. I'm looking only 2-dimensional things, but we are working in 3 dimensions. And that means that for the n to the cube pixels that are of this second order field, you have to perform n to the 6 terms. And this is very bad because, for example, given song, the interpolation and the translation of the curvature perturbation, the multiplication and so on, if you would like to compute the exact result for n equal 1000, you would have to wait almost 10,000 years, so that only 10,000 years old people could know the answer of this run. And of course, this is impossible. So we have to make some assumption, and we are interested at relativistic effects. And we know that those relativistic effects are important at large scales. So let us introduce a cutoff, k lambda. And for the scales that are smaller than k lambda, we can perform the exact computation. The complexity of this computation will be n lambda to the cube, because there is n lambda to the cube pixel to compute now. And for each of those pixels, we will have to perform n to the cube sum. So that now we have an n to the cube and no more n to the 6. So now, if for the modes that are larger than k lambda, we perform what we call the large small scale splitting. So we just rewrite our first order curvature perturbation as a sum of a large scale contribution and a small scale contribution, thanks to this window function here. And now this product here of the two first order curvature perturbation can be written as a sum of a sum of the product of, so there are 4 terms, one large coupling, one small large coupling, and etc. So first of all, let us note that those 2 terms, SL and LS, so L stands for large and S for small, those 2 cross terms are equal up to a change of variables. So we can just compute one of them and multiply by 2. Now, the large coupling here, you see that we always multiplied large scale pixels with other large scale pixels. So this mainly contributes to large scale equilateral configurations. So we want to compute them for relativistic effects, because relativistic effects are important at large scale near the horizon. And here we have this specific term that take into account the squeezed limit, which, as Clément explained, is very important for the purpose of studying primordial non-Gaussianities, because we always coupled a small mode with a large mode. And this term here is the one that is the most costly to compute, because it's scaling as n to the 6. This is this term that is very long to compute. And we know that relativistic effects are not important at small scales, well, when you couple a small and another small scale. So we can just suppress this term. We don't compute it. And at the end, the complexity of those 2 terms will be, again, n to the cube, because for n to the cube pixels, you will only have to compute n lambda to the cube terms, because here most of the terms are 0 and it remains only n lambda terms. So to summarize, the D3P is an initial condition generator that computes the second order contribution to a field. If you are at large scales, it computes the exact, it performs the exact computation. And if you are at large scales, then it neglects the small coupling, and it will only compute the large and the squeezed limits configuration. And here you can replace, usually in our code, we put the Song second order transfer function, which is density, CDM density second order transfer function. But you can actually put any kernel that you would like to study. So F2, KP plus is available in D3+. This is a nice approximation of this Song kernel, and it's analytic. So this is very interesting. And you could also take into account primordial non-Gaussianities. So next we have tested our code. So first we have computed the power spectra of the delta 1 and delta 2 contribution. So we coupled the power spectrum is a 2-point correlation function, but in Fourier space. So we just have to couple scales. And at first order, we have a quite good, very good agreement with the theoretical prediction. And at second order, as expected, we have a very good agreement if k is smaller than k lambda. And of course, this is expected because this is exactly what our approximation means. But of course, we are very interested at the squeezed limit. So by computing the bispectrum, we can reproduce the theoretical bispectrum that we can compute from the Song second order transfer function. And so we are very happy about that. But this is not the end of the story because Song provides us the second order transfer function for the delta, but we could also, by solving all the Einstein equation, find the second order transfer function for all the potentials. So for example, the 0, Einstein equation gives you phi 2 as a function of delta 2 that is provided by Song and chi 2 and psi 2 prime. And chi 2 can be obtained using the traceless Einstein equation as a function of the first order, only first order squared terms. Phi prime 2 can be computed using the trace Einstein equation, and it tells you that it is a function of chi 2 that you already know. And one very important thing for the initial condition for n-body simulation is the second order velocity. So as usual, we split the velocity as a scalar part and a curl part. This scalar part can be obtained as a function of the potential that we already know thanks to the I/O Einstein equation. And assuming vanishing vorticity, like in this article, we can show that the curl of the second order velocity vanish, so we don't have to care about it. And all those kernels can be chosen to compute the initial conditions. But this is not the end of the story because we want to use Jevolution. And Jevolution, to generate initial condition, needs the so-called displacement field. So what is a displacement field? So imagine you have a grid with particles inside. So the position of all your particles in a homogeneous way can be always obtained from an homogeneous grid plus a small vector, displacement vector, which is the displacement field. So here, Y is a homogeneous grid. X is the exact position of the particles, and Xi is the displacement field. And the thing is that, so when you have particles, if you want to compute any quantity, for example, the stress energy tensor at a certain point in the grid, you will have to perform a sum like this. This is a sum over the particles. You have a delta function to know if your particle is at the grid point you want where you want to compute the quantity, and you have here the mass of the particles, a cube, the scale factor, and any function, because if you want t00, this will be a certain function of the potential, and so on. And this kind of sum in the continuum limits can be written as an integral over the homogeneous grid with Mn transforming into the, of course, the rho bar, the background density that is constant, of course, because it's a background quantity. And then you can perform this integral by changing the variable from y, the homogeneous grid, to x. And this will involve the Jacobian of this transformation. This Jacobian can then be expanded, and you will see then the Xi, so the displacement field, appearing in this expansion. And then, for example, we can use the T00 stress energy tensor component, and defining the density this way, we can find, so as in Adamek 2016, the first order equation of the displacement field as a function of delta 1, the density, first order density, and the first order potential phi. And we can also find the second order expression of the displacement field as a function of the second order density and phi 2 and of course other quadratic term in first order field. So we can add this small computation in this computational box here, and we can also compute now all the quantity that we need for G-evolution, and we need 3 fields for the initial conditions. We need the second order displacement field, of course, also the first order one, the velocity, and the potential. And then usually we start our computation, we compute all those quantities at a redshift of 100, and then we perform the evolution until redshift 0. And our goal, so now we are working on measuring the bispectrum at redshift equal 0. And then we want to estimate the FNL. And remember that we have assumed at the beginning that the FNL primordial should be 0. So if we measure an FNL of order 1, for example, then we will be sure that we need to take into account the second order evolution in order to have a safe measurement of primordial non-Gaussianities of the local type. So as a conclusion, one of the main ways to constrain inflation is a hunt of primordial non-Gaussianities. One of the type of primordial non-Gaussianities that are very interesting is the so-called local type, who has for amplitude FNL. And this kind of non-Gaussianities can be generated by multi-field inflation. And one of its main features of the local type is to couple the large and small scales, the so-called squeezed limits, as Clément explains. The current and future large-scale structure surveys will probe an FNL of order 1. So it will be very important if the relativistic effects can also generate a couple between large and small scales, and thus an FNL of order 1, to take those effects into account in order to have a safe measurements. And for this, we have developed a second order initial condition generator called D3P. This generator uses so perform an exact computation of the integral for the large scales, and we use an approximation for the small scales in order to take into account only the squeezed limit by neglecting the costly small coupling. And it is we have shown that it is accurate at large scales and in the squeeze limit, and of course because of this approximation we are no more accurate in small scales. Then by running G-evolution we should measure a non-zero FNL that could be sourced by relativistic effect, because we didn't inject FNLs at the beginning. So D3P can compute any other type also of second order initial condition as long as the small coupling is negligible. So you can use your favorite kernel to generate the initial conditions and use n-body simulations.